वेलकम ये तो मैंने गुस्सा निकाल दिया। अब ये है कि we have Burhan on call yesterday, head of commercial at MC4U. Is that right, Burhan?
This is Lakhi, mate.
Yeah. Where's Burhan? Pardon?
I don't know.
You're on now, right? Okay. You've managed to catch up. Okay, Lakhi Singh, morning. We don't have Burhan this morning. Isn't he supposed to be early this morning? Position? Right, he's not responding. Okay, great. So we have Lakhi Singh. Good morning, Lakhi Singh. How are you doing? Welcome to the morning drive time session with Lakhi Singh, the property fixer, the man, the extraordinaire, the ex, the tra, the owner, and the neri. Yes, extraordinary. And a man who can make things happen in the city, make things happen when it comes to your property and your business affairs. Hence, the property fixer and the business fixer. Lakhi Singh, morning to the show. As usual, today's topic is a continuation of yesterday's. Number one, the quote of the week being, no situation that seems difficult is real. So it's always an illusion. It's in your head. Any situation that's difficult is an illusion. So starting with that, I think we've read in some notes about your business style and the way you work, is that you use the terminology getting your back up. So when things are difficult, why would you put your back up? Is there a reason, and is this some clever business strategy that you use to deflect difficult situations, or is it a strategy you use to confront the problem to get the matter fixed, as you are the property fixer? So is any problem as big as you want to make it, or do you actually use the clever Lakhi Singh tool of getting your back up?
Sorry, I don't know what you mean by getting your back up. What are we discussing here?
The topic is any problem or any situation is not that bad. It's more of an illusion. It's as bad as you want to make it. So we're talking about problems that come in front of you. And we've read in notes previously about you that you have used this clever strategy called don't get my back up. So I'm trying to work out, is this some business strategy you have in fixing your problems and not looking at problems as a big monster, and basically realizing that problems are an illusion? Or are you deflecting people from the fact that you're not able to solve the problem? So when you use this terminology, don't get my back up, what does that mean?
I don't know. So I think we can ignore this.
We'll ignore it. I think we read it in some notes somewhere about your style and how you manage.
I think you may be talking about something that I'm not aware of, but I can't remember. So I think let's just move on.
So amnesia is probably also a good business strategy to have, and not remembering where you may have used these terminologies. So we move on. So the topic, obviously, underlying topic this week is negative equity. And if we continue, I mean, the reason we had head of commercials on this morning with us was a lot of the lending that is done by bridge finance companies, and those are the ones that you employ to do a lot of quick finance. They obviously need properties or collateral, and normally the collateral is in the shape of properties. How does negative equity affect the ability for someone to get bridging finance in terms of quick finance if people have negative equity?
Basically, what will happen is that let's take an example. If somebody's got 3 properties which haven't got negative equity, and they've got 3 that have got negative equity, then the question is, can they still get borrowing on the assets which haven't got negative equity? But obviously, if they're negative, it's impossible to get any funding on those 3 assets. But the other 3 assets still may have enough cash in them So to make it very simple, let's say one property has £100,000 and it's paid up, and another property is negative equity. The value is 50, and the debt is let's say 70,000. So technically, the person is not really in negative equity because they've got enough of a surplus in one property to still get funding to pay off all their debts.
So that's a clever position there, because a lot of people probably think they've got negative equity in one property, they can't get finance on it. What you're saying is, if they've got a group of properties or a bunch of properties, and there are properties in there that got equity, you can get finance against the collateral of all of those properties still, even though one or two may have negative equity. Is that right?
That's correct. So that one very simple way of countering the issue of negative equity, but that bit is something that's doable. So that's strategy number one. Strategy number two is that let's take another example. Somebody's got, let's say, two negative equity properties, but they've got no equity anywhere else. So their residential house, they may be renting, but they may have two buy-to-let properties which are negative equity. So let's take an example. Let's just say that two properties are valued at 50,000, but the debt is 70. They've gone into negative equity because the values have fallen in that area. What do they do? How do they get out of that problem? Now, there's about 4 or 5 simple ways of solving that problem. Number one is they may have a very good income. It might be an IT director of a large corporation on £100,000 a year and just bought these assets, and he's got savings in ISAs that he can easily of £200,000. He can easily write down the debt and get it all paid off. That's a very simple way of solving the problem. So that doesn't take any it's not rocket science to solve it in that way. Second thing may be that the person may have a business that's making a good turnover and is profitable, and they may be able to get a cheap loan against the business to pay off the debts or bring the debts down to a reasonable level. So they could take out 2 mortgages against those assets, let's just say for £40,000-50,000 each, if they can get that level of, depending on the value. If the values are 50, sometimes it's difficult to get debt funding on properties which are at the valuation price of 40,000. But let's just say, for argument's sake, they can get funding and they get 30,000 in each property. They'll need to raise another 40,000 in each property to get rid of all their debts. And if business turnover is good, they've got good profitability, they may be able to take a loan out at a good rate for 80,000 to bring the debt down. That's the strategy number 2. That could be feasible, but if the cost of actually implementing that is so high that it's going to leave the client debt ridden, then they'd want to think twice about that. Would they really want to put good financial position into a bad financial position? And this is where we have solutions in place to actually counter those sort of situations. So that's situation number 2. Situation number 3, it may be that they speak to their granddad or their father or mother or relatives. They say, look, we're happy to help you out because we've got plenty of equity. We're happy to refinance one of our properties to actually help you pay off your debts. So those are 3 simple solutions that most people might consider in terms of solving their negative equity problem. But this is what they would normally do. We'd probably have other solutions which may be more beneficial in this regard rather than those 3 solutions. But do you want me to go into those 3 solutions, or you want to should we discuss negative equity in a broader aspect before we
Well,
go
no,
into.
I'm just. I think you're going to solution mode. I was just trying to work out negative equity and obviously how it impacts people trying to get finance, because I think we did have Burhan lined up for the call this morning. But anyhow, leave that aside. Right, we keep coming across this word market value, valuation, market, forces, etc., etc. Who is determining valuation then? Is there an organization? Is it a body? Is it an individual? Is it a bald-headed guy sitting with levers in the back office in the Bank of England? Who is it? Who is determining valuation? Because I seem to feel that's one of the fundamental levers for creating negative and positive equity. Is that correct? Am I right in understanding that for our listeners, or is it different? Who is it determines value, market value?
Um, well, the fundamental lever is actually the surveying companies and the banks. So
Surveying company, right? Okay, so who's a survey? What do you mean by surveying company?
somebody wants to refinance a property. The valuation of that property is done by a surveyor who actually acts on behalf of the bank to protect their financial position, the amount of money they're going to lend you.
Okay, so you're saying the bank appoints the surveyor.
That's right.
Okay, so there's a relationship now with the bank and the surveyor. Is that
That's
right?
right. That's correct.
Okay, so the bank appoints a surveyor, so that means the surveyor is really working for the bank, is he, or for the client? Who pays for the surveyor?
Surveyor is working for the bank to ensure that any money that they're lending, actually, and they manage the risk for the bank. So they can't be putting their license at risk by lending them on something that may jeopardize the lending that the bank is doing to the client. So what happens? Surveyors go out. What they'll do is, if you're doing a normal term loan, the situation is normally quite positive in the sense that the banks normally value up on the open market value. But the open market value is relative to the risk to the bank, if the bank's tightening up their positioning.
What do you mean by open market value? That's a new term that you've brought into the mix. You've got a market value, you've got a valuation. What's an open market value? What does that mean?
Two types of valuations. An open market valuation is somebody typically buying a residential house. That's usually done on an open market value, which is what the normal market would be for a retail or a residential sale in that neck of the woods. But then you get another type of valuations, which is called a 180-day val and a 90-day val. And 180-day val usually is discounted by about 5 or 10%. It's usually done by bridging companies. But a 90-day val can be discounted by as much as 10-15%. Bridging companies use those valuations because they want to reduce their risk even further or lend less money. So a lot of bridging companies tend to lend on 90-day or 180-day vals, which reduces the value of the asset and reduces the risk of the bank or the bridger. So I hope that makes sense.
Okay, it didn't really make sense because you've not explained what an open market valuation is and what a valuation is. You've gone to 90-day val and 180-day val, and it's still not clear. But let's say a big shout out to Carolyn Williams. Obviously says, let's dance. So she obviously refers to the fact Lakhi Singh is out in open today in some park, I think, in some very discreet location.
I'm in Berkeley Square.
Right, you're in the square, right? Okay. You're outside of your offices. So you got Lucky Singh, and you got a big shout out from Carolyn. Got a shout out from Harry, and we also have Nina. So Nina Patel, Harry, and Carolyn. Shout out to you all this morning on the drive time. And Carolyn says, "Let's dance." So I suppose she's expecting you to do a bit of Bhangra or breakdancing in Berkeley Square at the end of this session, which we'll probably ask you to do for the sake of satisfying Carolyn's wish. Okay, so continuing with the topic, what is a market val and what's the difference between an open market val? First, explain that, Lucky. You've not explained that properly. You've jumped from open market val to 190, 180 in a 90-day. What does that mean?
So open market value is the highest value a property can achieve by a surveyor.
Yeah.
And so there's different terminology which actually refers to the highest market value. So one is open market value.
Okay.
Another one is called a RICS, Red Book value, and they're pretty much the same.
What's meant by RICS? So you seem to come out with all these new terminologies. You're obviously dazzling us with your knowledge, but what do you mean by RICS? What does that mean? RICS is a guy, is he a person? Rick is a friend of yours?
RICS is a body that determines the surveying methodology for all surveys that get carried out in the UK.
RIC is a body.
RICS is a acronym.
RICS.
For, I think it's Institute of Surveyors, Chartered Surveyors.
Yeah. Institute, that's IX.
I think it's Royal Chartered.
Royal, yeah, okay.
Probably what it is.
Yeah, so it's Royal Chartered, Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, yeah?
Right. Somebody can look it up while I can't look anything up because I've got the camera in my hand. So I'm just multitasking.
Okay. So we say RICS means the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, and that's the body or the organization that underwrites or drafts out the rules of valuation. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they determine the methodology by which surveys are carried out, and the means within which properties can be valued. So in some ways, they hold the key to really what will get valued up and what won't, because they set the criteria.
Okay, so they are an institute, which is a Royal Institute. They get appointed by the bank. The bank is the one who's lending the money. So is it that the bank has determined negative and positive equity? Is that the way it happens? If the bank is appointing them, they're asking someone to evaluate on a property that they've got to lend money on. So is it that the bank is saying the value up or value down, and then they're making a property worth negative equity or positive, or how does that work?
The surveying company gets a valuation by value the offer of the price of the property for a purchase, let's say, or a refinance, and the surveyor will go in and determine whether the property is of that value. And what happens sometimes is if the surveyor deems the property to be lower than the offer value that's been put in for a purchase or a refinance, they will look at local comparables, sold prices on that road, in that area, that's similar sort of property, and if they think the value is lower, they won't value any higher, I don't think, but they normally value it lower, and say, well, this property is only worth about, the offer says 200, but we think it's worth 160 because we haven't seen any properties sell for £200,000. It's a 3-bed semi, and there's about 100 3-bed semis in this road in the same condition, but we can't see any property selling for 200,000. And sometimes what might happen is that property has got planning permission for a loft conversion and a double side extension or something. So property may value up for that reason. But if they've got that information, then they may then consider valuing it up to 200. But if that information is not known to them, they may not necessarily value up that property. So there's lots of anomalies when it comes to valuations. So you can never be too sure about the end val. You always have to do your homework.
Okay.
And one of the techniques a lot of people do who are property investors, or I've certainly done in the past, is done all the comparables beforehand when it comes to property investment. Take three examples with me and show them to the surveyor to say, look, here's a sample of all the properties that sold for this sort of price locally, so they don't end up valuing the property down.
Right. So you're saying there's a bit of influence that has to be determined by the individual on the surveyor, because the surveyors are normally very stupid in real sense.
I wouldn't say they're stupid, but they will follow their protocols, their process. So you can sort of help them or see what you're seeing and the way you're seeing it. That may guide your price. So I have been in a situation in the past where they have valued down from the offer price or from a refinance. So I wanted to get them to refinance up. So if you can show them good rental figures from the property itself, or you can show them maybe the rental figures, also a similar property, a similar value that's been sold locally or refinanced by or another survey, giving them proofs, then they may take that into consideration. But it all depends on the surveyor. So it's a bit of a lucky dip in some senses, because you don't really know until you get the final heads up. So some investors, what they do is if they're bridging, they may use a couple of different surveyors and spend an extra couple of £1,000 or £400-500, depending on the survey, to get another opinion.
Okay.
And that will make a difference between £30,000-40,000 either way in terms of cash flow for them.
Okay, so you used another terminology that was red book. What is this? Is this like one of those hidden account books of ledgers of people who owe money to someone, or is it more like the mafia red book? Is it one of those red books like the red diaries for a call girl type of red book? What is it? What does that mean, red book?
My understanding of red book is it's basically a survey done by the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. Is actually a formal survey by them. So I think it's called a red book. I think that's my understanding, but I don't know the exact Wikipedia definition of a red book as such. I'm sure we can look it up.
Okay. No, I think you did say earlier it was like the code to valuations. Sorry? It's a code. I think you said it was the code or the handbook, the practice guidelines to a chartered surveyor once he values a property. So it is regarded in short forms as the red book value. So the red book being the guidelines or the code for a valuation and those key points they have to adhere to when they're conducting a valuation. For example, their values should be at an arm's length. So what does that mean? Do you walk around with the virus code? You can't stand next to me at a 6-foot distance. Nope, it means the arm's length means that anybody who has instructed them or anybody who has paid them for that instructions are not influencing the actual valuation. So that's one of the codes in that red book. So I think they refer to it as a red book value in terms of following the code of practice of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. I think that's what you said last time, anyway. Was that right?
I've got amnesia, like you said. Sometimes I get amnesia for some things, and also for others.
Mm-hmm. So you had a knee jerk on that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on. So now we know what the red book is. Now we know what a valuation is. We know who the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors are. That's the organization, or the umbrella organization that appoints people to value. So a surveyor, I assume, is a person who goes out and does the survey to establish value. Is that right?
That's right. So the surveyor has to be registered with the RICS, and also they also have to have an indemnity. So one scenario is the scenario for most surveyors is that, well, all surveyors is that they have to have an indemnity, and obviously if they make a mistake on the survey, the bank loses money. They're going to have an indemnity, and the bank or the client that's used the survey can sue them if something goes wrong.
So it's for both parties.
Second, sorry?
Is it for both parties? So it's also for the borrower as well as for the lender bank?
I think it's for both parties, from my understanding. So if there's a problem that occurs because the surveyor's actually given misinformation, they haven't done the survey properly, and there's a subsidence, let's say, and the property loses value by 100,000 when the next purchaser is buying it. But let's say a detailed survey is carried out. I think it's called a home buyer's report. Then what would happen is that the initial buyer can actually sue the surveyor for their losses. Yeah. And
so there is an ability for both parties to sue the surveyor if they don't conduct a real valuation. Is that right?
That's right. Or they make a so surveyors on the whole tend to be very risk averse in terms of what they will put down, because if something goes wrong, then their personal liability, their indemnity insurance will be affected, and if they get too many claims, then the cost of that indemnity can go up, double-fold or triple-fold, and that reduces their capacity to operate as a business. So
okay, so can I ask you a question then? There was this terminology that's been bandied around in the past 5-10 years. The bubble is burst in the property market. It's bubble burst. Can I ask you then, is this bubble about the value of properties going increasing from 2000 onwards to about 2007, going up year on year, increasing? And if there is an indemnity, surely is there not a claim that a lot of these homeowners, people who purchase properties that are not worth that anymore, could make on the surveyors, saying that they overvalued or they valued an asset that wasn't really worth that? Or how does that work then?
I wouldn't say I'm an expert in that area, but from what I've seen, in the last recession, there were a lot of lawsuits against surveyors because the property values had gone in and valued the property at $500,000, and after, let's say, the crash had hit, some of the same properties were being valued at 300,000 in certain areas of the country which were hardest hit. So that's actually a major issue, because there's a likely to be a recurrence of that issue now. But a lot of these new build projects or off-plan projects, they technically can be valued at quite a high price, because it's difficult to determine a new build's price. So they tend to usually have the biggest falls in, well, not always, but they tend to have the biggest fall in price, because there isn't, it's not an easy way of valuing them, because they've got no comparables, because there may be a new build block in a city where there are no, or a small town where there are no blocks. So that's the first of its kind.
Right.
So I think there's a lots of anomalies which slip through the net in terms of pricing for surveyors, or understanding really how they, what they should and shouldn't accept.
Yeah. Okay, big shout out from Alan Roy, who says, how are things, Lakhi, nowadays? And he runs a group called Business, I think, How to Do Business. Sorry, that's right. So obviously, Alan Roy, Lakhi, is giving you his regards, and he's obviously asking you how things are. Pardon?
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm not Alan. Yes, but you're saying it back to Alan. Like he says, how are things going, or how are you doing? But he runs a group called Business Opportunities. So probably an interest for you to have a chat with him, and for him to have a chat with the ABS, the Alternative Business and Properties Solutions community. Maybe there's some synergy there. Okay, continuing. So we've understood that values determine negative and positive equity. Is that correct, Lakhi?
Yeah, prices, when price is actually conducted, sorry, when survey is conducted, that's actually the point at which you have to think most about, you know, the impact of, you know, how it's going to determine your ongoing asset, your investment.
Yeah.
So a lot of investors, when they purchase assets, what they want to do is they want to buy an asset, let's say for 100, and they may be getting it discounted from 150 because somebody wants to sell quickly, or they've got a matter where the asset needs to be sold at a lower price because speed or for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So when they're buying, they actually want to buy with minimal cash input. So what they usually try and do is they try to they may buy the asset for 100, really cheap, spend £5,000 or £10,000 on doing it up, bring the value up, then refinance it about 160 or 170. And this is where this is the typical thing that a lot of property investors want to do. They want to buy cheap, refinance or restructure up and take money out, and then use it for other purposes.
Okay, that's not the same topic as negative and positive equity in valuations. That's just telling you a technique, I believe, where you could effectively get 100% finance by buying property at a discount, doing it up so it's got a value add, refinancing at the higher value, which technically means you get all your money out, if not a bit on top. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Morning from Bob Singh. Lakhi Singh, to you. Big shout out, hi to Bob Singh. Yes, get down to you too, Bob Singh, from Lakhi Singh. Okay, so we continue. So we understood now negative equity is something that's determined by surveyors who are appointed by banks. The RICS, or the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, have a code that every surveyor has to comply to. Now, a surveyor is wonderful. I heard in the last 5-10 years that the banks had actually voided valuations from surveyors. I think Lucky's on the move or something. Are you Lucky? You're making moves, are you?
Yeah, I've got back into the car because it's got quite noisy there. Some
Okay,
major
so,
roadworks.
okay, so you're making moves in the car now. Yeah. So the point is, you've got the banks who had stopped using surveyors, and they were relying upon estate agent valuations. Did that actually happen?
Well, I would say that I don't think they've ever relied on estate agent valuations, but there is a certain element of checks they do with estate agents to check the validity of their whatever they're doing. So there is a certain element of estate agency checks they do, especially on the commercial side. Commercial assets are probably more determined by estate agents in some ways because it's a bit more of a niche and the surveyors don't always have access to the information. So they normally do rely upon the last square foot sort of price of properties in certain blocks, which is quite common from my experience anyway. So I think that's as much as I know about the topic from that side.
Okay, so you're saying that the banks haven't been using the local estate agent to value, they've always relied upon the Red Book valuation. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the Red Book valuer would normally do their comparables and ring up a couple of local agents and validate. And they would normally they normally know the area or know the agents quite well, and they'll have their go-to agents that they normally go to, who they think would probably give them a better understanding of the local pricing.
Yeah, but isn't that a bit of a contradiction, Lucky? Because an estate agent always wants to sell at the higher price, the best price. Why? Because his commission is linked to the higher value, but the risk has to be at an arm's length. So why would he take reference from an estate agent whose influence or his incentive is to value up because his commissions depend upon it? Isn't that a bit doesn't that become a bit convoluted?
Well, what happens is that you don't necessarily ring the estate agents who's actually put the property up for sale and who's actually dealing with the transaction. They normally ring other agents nearby, which would have similar properties on their books just to verify. And yeah, so it is a little bit of hit and miss on their part because a lot of agents will have different views on how they understand the value of assets, and they don't always actually value them up. Sometimes they will value them down as well in those localities. But if the agent themselves, the agent that's selling or actually selling the asset itself, and is the agent who's actually made this particular sale, they would obviously be trying to push the price up because they get higher commissions. But the other agent that the surveyor talks to may not be of the same mindset or understanding of the local market.
Okay, we're stuck in surveyors, but the reason we're stuck in surveyors is because they are fundamental to determining the value of a property. Is that correct, Lucky?
Yeah, I think they pretty much determine the final price to some degree.
Okay, so why was it in 2007 there was a major market crash? Did all the surveyors decide to just start valuing down? Did something else happen?
Yeah, so as soon as the crash happened, a lot of surveyors going in to do evaluations suddenly started valuing the properties down because they're losing their indemnity. And
indemnity, is that what they're valuing down?
Well, they're valuing down because their indemnity is at risk, and if the property markets crashed around them, So something that's somebody's buying at 180 and they think it might be overpriced, they'll go in. It may still get refinanced at 180 if the bank's happy with it, but they may literally go in and find a couple of excuses and say, look, all right, there's a, the pipe, the drainage on the side is actually got like a tear. So they'll find reasons to bring the value of the property down, or they'll try and find as many things as they can, which is likely to bring the price down to cover their backs. So that's just common practice that they would do that.
Okay. So if we know there was a bubble and it burst and the market value, where is the market now then? In your expert opinion, has the market recovered? Are we back? Are we in positive? Are we in negative? Where is the market? What's your overall picture of the United Kingdom? Are property values back to where they were before 2007? Are they still increasing? We had Ms. Patel yesterday say her opinion was house prices in the north were going up because of the capital influx. But is that the truth? Is that what's happening? Are the property values now going back to pre-2007? What's the general? What's the landscape of property? Where are we?
So I think we are in a state of going through a mini boom, an artificial boom, I would say, because
a mini boom, is that like mini you and mini sort of Lucky, like a small U?
No, not quite like that at all. There is no mini me.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, so what I mean by a mini.
Joe Patel this morning again, saying hello to everybody. To you, Lucky.
You get these little thumbs like that.
Yeah. So yeah, the point is a mini boom. You say, what's that? Is that like a mini Lucky, like a midget or Lucky, or what does that mean?
So basically, assets all around the country, which are below the $500,000 mark, and don't have to pay stamp duty for a year on the purchasing. I think there's certain specific rules about how that's implemented. But basically, it means that stamp duty is like reduced to zero below $500,000. So that's actually allowing for prices to, a lot more investor interest or interest from people now to be buying assets because they're actually getting that reduction. So it makes it easier and less costly. So a lot of people are taking advantage of that, either as a residential house or from an investment point of view. But I think that's only a year's sort of, it's only been done for a year. And after that, it's no longer going to be there. So I think the market after that is actually going to, tighten rapidly because we're going to be able to buy and sell as easily, or let's say sell the buyers. It's going to become more of a buyer's market, I would say, because sellers are probably still wanting a higher price, but they're not going to be able to achieve it. So about a year, let's say 10 months from now.
Are you saying the market is now out of the burst of the bubble where there was a lot of negative equity? Are we back into pre-2007 prices? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that because of Brexit and the pandemic, the market's tight in certain areas anyway. But there are mini booms in areas where there's good yielding properties. But then I don't think the negative equity problem is going to go away that easily, because whilst you've got the stamp duty advantage, you've also got the lack of finance or the ability to get finance so easily is also an issue. And I think that's a lesson. So I would say the tipping point of negative equity probably becoming more of a potential phenomenon again in this country is going to be literally about 8 to 10 months from now.
Okay, that's quite drastic news, Lakhi Singh. And what makes you think it's going to go back into negative equity?
Well, the thing is that people have bought assets and they haven't got the liquidity, and the prices are going to, let's say, fall. And if they haven't built in fixed rates or fixed interest rates, or they haven't built in value add, or they haven't really looked at countering any issues around negative equity, haven't put the contingencies in, then anybody's not really fortified themselves in that regard is going to be vulnerable to the market.
Okay. So what does the property fixer do for those people then? Have you got anything that's a solution in terms of assisting people with negative equity problems?
Well, most definitely, yes. What we've got is we've got a product called the Detox Property Portfolio Program. So anybody's got any sort of issue around their property portfolio, even their house, that may fall into some sort of toxic debt or some sort of property issue with the bank, arrears, defaults, build up of bridging debts or defaults, we will be able to do an assessment for them, and from that we can determine really how to wipe off the negative equity debt down to zero, because we've worked on a product that allows them to do that.
Okay, so you can wipe off the negative debt. Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
Okay, Dinesh, I think, is it Dinesh Panchani says this, good morning to us, everybody. He says hi. So hi back to you, Dinesh. Thank you very much for the shout out. Excellent. Okay, so you're saying you've got a unique solution. This is very interesting. What do you have that can wipe out the negative debt? Do you have a bank that does it? How does that work?
Okay, so what we typically do is somebody's got 10 properties, let's just say they're all negative equity. What we would do is we would put them, we've got a company that would put them into an IVA, and we would negotiate the debt on their behalf, and we would get them a deed of settlement, which would actually give them zero debt. But
okay, deed of settlement. You say this is a new terminology. What does that mean? Deed of settlement. What's that like? Is that like a full and final settlement that you get in unsecured lending? The same with
the same
credit card debts and loans? Is that the same thing, is it?
This is a document that says that you've got no more secured debts, and you can go back to your normal credit. So it puts you back in good stead financially again to what you used to before.
How long does it take? How long does it take you to get this deed of settlement?
About 3 to 6 months. It can take up to about 12 months if your case is like very complicated, but probably about 3 to 6 months, which is not
so how
really
do
that.
you sign up to this? Is this like do we just sign up and you say it's called the DP3 program? What do we do? Do we just sign up to it and you talk to us? Is it a legal department? How does it work?
Go to a website called rescuemyproperties.co.uk and put an inquiry form in, which will be in confidence, and then you'll be contacted by one of our staff, which are supporting the alternative property business solutions community, and set up a time of meeting with a consultant who would meet you face to face in our offices in Berkeley Square, or you can set up a Zoom call anywhere in the country, or you can meet with one of our consultants in Birmingham, whatever's easiest. And then from there, we would conduct a free half-an-hour sort of consultation just to understand your nature of your problem. And depending on the nature of it, we would then implement the solution for you if we think it's fits into the criteria of the IVA solution. Yeah.
Okay. Sajio Patel says, Lakhi, the question coming through because he's listening to what you're saying. Is it like a lease option agreement where you take control of the asset and you pay for the mortgage and everything, but you're not really the owner of the house or the asset? Is that the same? Is saying we have the option to take the lease, and in cases of flats, obviously. Otherwise, you have option deals, which are like the option to purchase. You take over the asset, you run it, you manage it as if it was your own, but you don't legally own it. And if like you're saying, there's going to be a massive interest rate hike because of interest rates going up, and then the properties are going to go under again. It doesn't mean that the lease option holder actually is liable for the debt. They can always hand the keys back. But she's saying, is it the same? Is that what you're doing? You're taking control of the assets, running them in a program, paying the debt off to the banks, and when the interest rates go up, you're going to throw the keys back to the owner.
No, they're not like a lease option at all. Lease options are a different kettle of fish. So this is literally the assets get taken over by the banks and then they get written off. So they're not the debts actually get written off altogether. So you're no longer in control. Whereas the lease options, an individual's taking them on, and if interest rates go up, the individual taking them on may have to give them back to the owner. So the person with the negative equity or debt problems, the debt's not going to go away. So the lease options are probably going to create a bigger hole for the negative equity person than a solution, because
so you're saying these options are just a temporary release from the
whoever the lease option holder is, they've got no the lease option holder has got no
obligation to pay the debt.
Control over the interest rates. If interest rates go up, then and they can't afford to keep up the payments on the lease option they've taken on, they'll literally have to throw back the asset to the owner of the asset back again. But
so what you're saying is they'll throw the asset back but keep the keys.
No, they'll have to give the keys back again as well, because
okay, so they'll throw the keys back and throw the asset back.
Right. I think I've actually saw that happen thousands of times in the last recession, and ended up untangling lots of lease options with pretty much the same problem that we're discussing now.
Okay, so Sadio, I hope that satisfies the question, and that is lease options are definitely not realistic in their approach, because they only keep control of the assets while the interest rates are low. As soon as interest rates go up, then it gets blown out of the water, which is different to the DP3 program, I believe. And I think you mentioned in some of your notes that we've read that the DP3 program relies upon an IVA model. Is that right? Or the IVA is the vehicle where you run this program through?
That's correct, yeah. So we'll determine
this is being done in an official way, but it's reducing the liability with the bank by negotiating. So we've got a marked difference between a lease option and the DP3 program, where the DP3 program, you're saying, Lakhi, takes the debt by the horns and actually deals with the problem rather than delays a problem. Is that what you're saying, Lakhi?
That's correct. We've already in this year, we've dealt with over 1,000 clients who've actually had negative equity problems or a glitch of negative equity in their portfolio. But we've been 100% successful in writing those debts off and getting our clients back into clean credit mode. So
Excellent.
So this is one of the main reasons we've launched this community, because as the problem's worsening, we want to reduce the level of homelessness that's out there, and also make sure that these assets which are there, that you're not really going to have prolonged issues between tenant and landlord, which actually could be suffocating a lot of tenants, but it could also suffocate the debt issue for the landlord as well. So if we can deal with it early, it actually stops a lot of turmoil in the market. So using this solution, we could be potentially saving, I would say, hundreds of thousands of people from a lot of unnecessary aggravation, either from the landlord or from the tenant. So I think it's pretty much a unbeatable solution, and it solves problems.
Okay, well, we've got Sajil Patel, who's going to be joining us tomorrow morning in the drive time with Lakhi Singh. So it'll be wonderful to see you live tomorrow morning, Sajil, on the program. So we're coming to the end of today's drive time. So we've discussed really the topic around surveyors and the Chartered Institute of Surveying, who creates values, and it's because the values go up and go down that create negative equity. Tomorrow's topic will be concentrating around finance. And is it not finance that is screwing the market up? If there wasn't finance that you needed to take out to buy a property, you wouldn't be in any negative equity, because all you do is you buy the property and you'd sell it at the price you bought it, or you'd lose some money in the sale. So really it's because the United Kingdom market relies heavily on the financial institutes to lend money for people to buy houses. If there wasn't finance, there wasn't a reliance on finance, then there wouldn't be a requirement for the RICS, and there wouldn't be a major requirement to have financial tools that go up and down because of the valuations. So again, any problem in your business, we're talking about negative equity being a problem in your business, is that an illusion then? Is the negative equity an illusion, or is it real, Lakhi? So is any problem?
Negative equity can only be real because if you've got physical assets and the debt is on paper and showing on your bank statements with all the information you've got, is actually showing the value of the asset being, let's just say, 50,000 and the debt being 70, that is real.
Okay, so I'm going to go into tomorrow then. You're saying it's real. We're going to delve into the topic of the finance world and the accountancy world, and where we will realize whether the actual negative debt is real or not, because a lot of the banks have actually valued down their debt ledger. So the monies that they've borrowed out have been valued down, yet they're chasing the debtor for the full amount of money. How does that work? We'll find out tomorrow. It's going to be an interesting topic. Last minute, Lakhi, can you summarize today and give us your brief understanding of where the market's at and how negative equity will be impacted, if not now, in the near future? You say 8 to 10 months, which is not nearly too far off, a bit worrying. So what makes you think the negative equity is going to hit us again? And what makes you think interest rates are going to go up?
Okay, quick summary. You have to be very careful.
Hello from Mohsen Rabjani. He says, hello to you, Mohsen, to Lakhi Singh. Thank you for giving us a shout out. Continue, Lakhi.
Hi, Mohsen, how you doing? Okay, so quick summary about today. If you're beginning to buy assets now because you've got your fluid in cash and you've got a lot of cash or money available or equity available to start buying assets, then you just got to be careful that you don't get caught in the negative equity trap. So that's for anybody starting off. So you just have to be very careful about the way your properties are valued.
Okay, last 5 seconds, Lakhi, thank you very much. Just going to be careful about how you're buying property. Be careful how you spend. Tomorrow the topic will continue: debt, finance, negative equity, and the fact that all your problems are really an illusion. Thank you very much, Lakhi Singh. Today we didn't get in Noor. I think he was out on some territorial army training session, preparing for a takeover of the Eritrean community in Ealing. We'll speak to you tomorrow morning with our special guest. That's going to be what's the name?
Patel.
Pardon?
Sagal Patel.
Sajal Patel, that's right. Sorry about that, Sajal. I forgot because I'm having to remember so many new names. Sajal Patel in the morning is going to be with us, and hopefully she will thrash you on the topic of negative equity, and the problems that you face are all an illusion. Thank you. Lakhi Singh, the property fixer. Speak to you tomorrow morning, drive time.